Okay, so welcome back. Things have been absolutely insane here in Florida. There's been CP child trafficking rings that have been busted. You know, this week, I think there's been 3 or 4 of them that has been busted. There's another one that just got busted in Daytona Beach. But right now we're talking about the Madeline Soto case. And Madeline Soto was found deceased. Her stepfather, Stephen Stearns, was abusing her for many, many years. And there was a gentleman that came out by the name of David Solomon that says he was a victim of Stephen Stearns. This is not Stephen Stearns' first time, and he was a victim back in 2012. He also dropped a number of names that he says is connected to Stephen Stearns. Now, we did a video. This is part 2, so if you want to go back and watch part 1, we talked about a couple of the people whose names he had dropped. During this video, I want to talk about James. So James came out and did an interview with Gray Hughes, and he told his side of the story. Now, David had already told his side of the story, so we have 2 sides of essentially what is the same story. So I want to compare both of their stories and see, where they're the same and where they're different, and basically, we can kind of go through these stories and see, is David Solomon being honest? Was James confirming what David Solomon said, or was he contradicting it? Who do you believe? Let's talk about it. So when David Solomon first came out, it was like, whoa, this guy's making some crazy allegations. I don't know if I believe him. I don't know if his story's true. I don't even think I understood what he was even trying to say in his video. But after I went and I actually listened several times, started researching the people he was talking about, I was like, whoa, this guy might be onto something. He might really be telling the truth. So now we're going down the rabbit hole together, you and me. We're going to do it together. We're going to see what we think. So the next guy that I want to talk about is James Artville. James is a guy that David Solomon has actually accused of being the one with his wife who actually took him from his mother's house and stole him and trafficked him to Canada. Now, James Artville has shared this video of Brian Davis. This we went over in part 1, so you would have seen these videos of Brian Davis. James is a friend of Brian Davis. They work together. They're seen on several videos working together. They have a very close business relationship and probably a friendship as well. So they are both connected through writing, but they're also both connected through the church, as you can see in this video where he is sharing the youth sermon that he had done on his page. So James is sharing Brian Davis's youth sermon where Brian Davis is talking to young children about basically being raped and abused. So now we're going to listen to some testimony from David Solomon, and we're going to compare it to James, and we're going to see where the stories align and where they don't align.
Somebody said, so you were 8, were you 18 when you were sex trafficked, or 19?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Some people were just asking, they were a little bit confused. What age you were when that happened. My oldest daughter is 31. The person sounds about 51. Who are you talking about?
Yeah, I was not 51. There's confusion on that, and I will shed light on that.
Mm-hmm.
When I was trafficked, my name was changed. So a girl named Sarah Rose, and you can look her up. She runs the Social Security Administration. She is connected to Stearns, by the way.
Interesting.
And she changed my name. And there is a rabbit hole trail.
Okay, so David Solomon says he was taken at 18 and they changed his name. And this was in 2012. Okay, so David Solomon says he was trafficked when he was 19, right? According to this, he was 19. It was back in January of 2012. Let's listen to what James says.
You got this number?
Well, I just found it on Ben Verified. Yeah. I'm just calling to check, hey, this guy is claiming these things. I also it sounded so absurd with the way the story was sounding. And I'm not really sure how Stephen Stearns could be involved because that's in Florida, and he lived in California at one time. But
I'm gonna just
nothing, Danielle. Pay attention to the audio. Okay.
He did travel with his mother from coast to coast. I know because another victim of his accusations his name is Brian Davis.
Uh-huh.
He lives
right. So Brian Davis was another name that he mentioned on that podcast. Okay.
Stalked and accused and all sorts of stories told of him.
Well, then it probably wouldn't surprise you, though, that he's also one of the people mentioned as being at that house.
in my house here.
Yeah, like you guys were all there.
We honestly, like, Charlotte and I, we were newly married. We were young. We were 20, 21 years old. We had a couple of young children, and Shiloh met him on Facebook, just chatting in a Brian Davis's group. They were fellow fans of his fantasy series, and they became friends, and they bonded over, geeking out, that kind of stuff. And at the time, we thought he was sick, but he was a minor. And he was telling about his mother, the cancer, and Shiloh was moved with pity. And so she agreed to have him stay with us while his mother underwent chemotherapy.
Okay, so James confirms that he does know Brian Davis, that in fact that's how his wife actually met David Solomon, was through the group, right? Through the chat group that we talked about in the other videos. So just to reiterate here.
And you've really tried to reach out to them in other ways too, besides the books. You know that they're connected to the internet, and so you've used that as a tool to talk to them. Tell me about that.
Yes, I have a very active message form. We've had over 1 million messages posted over the years, and I private message with the kids and help them with their problems. They're writing to me about pornography and cutting and all the things that kids are going through. To talk about it. What did this mean to you? Did you know that there is a Jesus who loves you? And so they come to Jesus by being exposed to the gospel and spiritual things through my books. And the kids reel them in, if you know what I'm saying. The kids do.
Okay, so it seems like everything's being confirmed on both sides. James knows Davis. He's in a chat group with Brian, and James has talked with Brian and met this what he believes is an underage kid, because remember, he says he believes that he is 16. Now, he's actually 19, but James believes he is underage and takes the child out of his home. On whose authority, we do not know at this point in time. He says he did talk to the youth pastor about it that David Solomon had, and the youth pastor warned him not to do it. So I'm wondering who told him to do it. Whose authority was it that he was taking the child? Because according to Mom's story, and according to everybody, Mom was stalking them and all upset because they had taken David. David obviously didn't want to be taken. So who decided for them to take David is my question. Did they just decide on their own that they were going to take what they believed was an underage kid away from their mother because they felt that they could better care for him while she was under chemotherapy? Now keep in mind, their only plan is to take him for 2 weeks according to what they were saying, which doesn't even make any sense because chemotherapy is not a 2-week thing, and anybody who's been through cancer knows this. Another thing I thought interesting was that Gray Hughes was like, how does David Solomon know Stephen Stearns? And James actually had the answer. He was like, well, David Solomon did travel around, so maybe, while he was in California, they met. So James is basically like solving the puzzle for us. Thank you, James.
He was definitely malnutritioned. Like, I'm confident that when he stayed with us, he had a very, very strict diet. He could only eat organic blue tortilla chips and unflavored, unseasoned organic chicken breast. And he was just very, his teeth, missing teeth, crooked teeth, terrible hygiene, very thin, anemic, bony. Like his mother was not taking care of him very well.
Okay, so everything that David Solomon is turning out to be true. And according to the interview with James, he knows Brian. Him and Brian are good friends. And he knows that David might know Stephen because he knows Brian. At least that was kind of how I understood it. Like, I know he, could have met him over in California because he travels. And I know this because he stalked Brian over in another state over there. And he didn't seem like when Gray Hughes brought up Stephen Stearns, there was no like, well, who's that? I don't know who that is. There was nothing of that sort. In fact, he seemed very comfortable talking about Stephen Stearns, almost like he already knew who he was. That's just my impression. That's the impression that I get. I don't know if they're friends. I don't know if they were hanging out. I don't have any confirmation or pictures or anything like that I can find. But there's definitely a lot of questions here, and this story is turning out to be kind of true.